The tension in the studio was thick, the kind that makes people sit up and pay attention. Cameras rolled, lights burned hot, and the audience barely breathed. They didn't know it yet, but they were about to witness something unforgettable. Across from the host sat Usha Vance, poised, unreadable. The air between them was charged, a quiet storm waiting to break. The host, a man who had built his career on catching guests off guard, adjusted his posture. His smirk was subtle, but it was there, a hint of the trap he was about to spring. Then, with a tilt of his head and a calculated pause, he dropped the question. "Do you regret marrying your husband?" The room shifted. A few audience members tensed, others leaned in, sensing a moment that would explode across headlines by morning. The question wasn't curiosity. It was a weapon disguised as casual interest. The host had played this game before, set them up, knocked them down. He was certain she wouldn't see it coming. But Usha Vance was no ordinary guest. She didn't blink. She didn't rush to respond. Instead, she let the silence stretch, heavier with every second that passed. The host waited, his smirk growing. He thought he had control. He was wrong. The room held its breath. A few gasps broke the silence, followed by a low murmur from the audience. Some people leaned forward, their eyes locked on Usha. Even the crew felt the shift. Camera operators instinctively adjusted their focus, sensing the weight of the moment. The host remained still, his fingers resting on his notes. He had been here before. This was his game. He had built a career on questions like this, ones that seemed harmless but were meant to put his guest in an uncomfortable position. If she denied regret too strongly, it could seem defensive. If she hesitated, the pause would be replayed 1,000 times. If she laughed, it could be twisted into doubt. Every possible reaction had an angle, a way to spin it. He knew how to push just enough to create a soundbite that would dominate the next day's headlines. But something was different. Usha didn't shift. She didn't break eye contact or reach for a glass of water. She didn't force a quick response just to fill the silence. The audience noticed. A few exchanged glances. The air in the studio felt heavier. The host, sensing the pause dragging on longer than expected, leaned slightly forward, as if encouraging her to speak. His smirk remained, but there was a flicker of curiosity now. Why wasn't she reacting the way others had? He had counted on discomfort. He had expected a moment of weakness, something he could latch onto. But instead of scrambling, she simply watched him. The pause stretched, not awkward, not panicked, controlled. The host tapped his pen lightly against the desk. A subtle movement, but it revealed something. He wasn't as confident as he had been just moments ago. This wasn't going according to plan. And for the first time in the conversation, he realized he wasn't the one in control. The silence lingered, stretching longer than the host had planned. His smirk, once so sure, started to slip. His fingers tapped against the desk, an unconscious sign of impatience. He had expected a reaction by now, anything he could seize on, twist, and turn into a headline. But Usha Vance wasn't giving him what he wanted. She finally spoke, but not in the way he expected. Regret. Her voice was calm, almost amused, as if he had asked something as trivial as whether she regretted drinking coffee that morning. The audience reacted. A few chuckled, others murmured. She hadn't dodged the question. She had turned it into something absurd, making him seem like the one who had said something foolish. The host shifted slightly in his chair. He wasn't used to guests taking control of the conversation. He attempted to push forward. "I just meant," he started, his tone still casual, but there was a slight edge to it now, "that given your husband's positions, some might assume." Usha tilted her head, studying him. Not rushed, not pressured, just watching. Then she leaned in slightly, not enough to seem aggressive, just enough to make it clear she was engaged. "You know," she said, her voice still light, "I always find these questions fascinating." Another ripple moved through the audience. The shift had happened. The host had set a trap, but instead of stepping into it, Usha had calmly placed it back in front of him. She continued, her words deliberate. "I can't help but wonder, have you ever asked a male politician's wife this question? The host blinked. The murmur in the audience grew. Some heads turned, exchanging glances. They could feel it. This wasn't the conversation the host had planned. I mean, Usha went on, still composed. I could sit here and list all the reasons I love and respect my husband, the values we share, the support we give each other, the life we've built together. She smiled. Not forced, not defensive, steady. But somehow, she added, her eyes fixed on the host, I don't think that's what you were really asking, is it? The host's lips parted slightly, but he said nothing. His confidence had flickered. He was the one who had to find a way to respond now. The audience knew it. They had just witnessed the moment everything shifted. The host loses his footing. The smirk that had once sat comfortably on the host's face had vanished. His posture, once relaxed and confident, now stiffened. He cleared his throat, his fingers twitching slightly as they hovered over his notes. This wasn't going as planned. He tried to regain control. Well, he started, forcing a chuckle. I was just curious. Usha didn't let him off that easily. Her eyes stayed locked on him, her expression unreadable. Then, with a slight tilt of her head, she responded, Were you? Or were you hoping for something else? The shift in power was undeniable. A few people in the audience chuckled. Others exchanged knowing glances. They weren't just watching an interview anymore. They were watching a takedown unfold in real time. The host shifted in his chair, flipping through his notes. But there was no saving this moment. He had taken his best shot, and Usha had sent it back without breaking a sweat. She continued, her voice steady, her tone deliberate. It's interesting, isn't it? Women in politics, or even women married to politicians, are always asked if they regret their choices. The room was silent, but I don't recall ever hearing a male guest sit in this chair and be asked if he regrets standing by his wife. The host opened his mouth as if to respond, but no words came out. The audience wasn't just entertained anymore. They were engaged. They saw exactly what was happening. The host scrambled. Well, given some of his positions, Usha let him speak, just for a moment. She leaned back slightly, giving the impression that she was considering his words. Then, she nodded, her voice smooth as ever. Ah, so that's what this is about. She wasn't asking. She was stating it outright. The host's fingers tightened around his pen. He shuffled his papers again, trying to find his way back to safe ground. But Usha wasn't done. This wasn't just an answer. This was a lesson. And the host? He was losing. The silence in the studio was deafening. The host blinked, his mouth slightly open, but no words came out. He had expected to lead the conversation, but now he was the one scrambling for a response. Usha leaned forward, her expression calm, her tone unwavering. Would you ask Michelle Obama if she regrets marrying Barack? The audience reacted instantly. A few gasps rippled through the crowd, followed by scattered chuckles. Some people turned to each other, whispering. The weight of the question settled over the room like a thick fog. The host swallowed, his smirk completely gone now. He shifted in his seat, his fingers tightening around his pen. He let out a short breath, trying to gather himself. Well, that's different, he finally muttered, attempting to regain control. Usha didn't hesitate. Is it? She raised an eyebrow, waiting for him to explain. The host hesitated. He knew whatever he said next could dig him into a deeper hole. But he had to say something. I just think, given your husband's views, it's a fair question. Usha nodded slowly, as if she were considering his words. Then she smiled, not forced, not defensive. Steady. If a woman stands by her husband, people question her choices. If a man stands by his wife, it's called a love story. Interesting. The audience murmured. A few clapped. Some even laughed. The host tried to laugh it off, but it sounded forced. I wasn't trying to imply anything negative. Usha didn't blink. Oh, I know exactly what you were trying to do. Laughter rippled through the studio. The host's face tightened. He tried to keep his composure, but the shift in energy was undeniable. Usha leaned back in her chair, completely at ease. The host, on the other hand, was gripping his notes, flipping through them as if searching for an escape. But it didn't matter. The moment was already hers. The audience could feel it, and so could he. The moment the interview aired, the internet erupted. Within minutes, clips of Usha's response spread like wildfire across social media. Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube were flooded with reactions. The host's expression, caught in that brief second of shock, became an instant meme. Screenshots of him blinking, shifting in his chair, searching for words were everywhere. People weren't just watching. They were dissecting every second of the exchange. Comment sections exploded with praise for Usha's calm, controlled handling of the situation. She didn't just answer, she dismantled him. Some called it one of the sharpest takedowns they had ever seen on live television. The reactions were immediate. Conservative media praised her performance. Headlines called it a masterclass in composure. Analysts broke down how she had turned the trap back on the host without raising her voice or losing her cool. Political commentators called it a rare moment where someone completely flipped the script in real time. On the other side, liberal media scrambled to manage the damage. Some tried to frame the moment as a misinterpretation of the host's intent. Others claimed Usha had deflected instead of answering directly. But it didn't matter. The audience had already made up their minds. Meanwhile, ordinary viewers saw something deeper. Women especially connected with Usha's words. "This isn't about politics," one person tweeted. "I've been asked the same kind of condescending questions in my own life." Another wrote, "She didn't get angry. She didn't get defensive. She just held up a mirror." The network, realizing the scale of the backlash, scrambled to control the narrative. The host released a carefully worded statement, insisting his question had been taken out of context. But no one bought it. The clip was too clear. His smirk, his attempt to corner her, the way he lost control. It was all there. Think pieces started pouring in. "Was this sexism?" asked one columnist. "Why are political spouses held to different standards?" questioned another. Articles debated whether this moment revealed a bigger problem in media coverage of women in politics. But the truth was already out. This wasn't just an interview. It was a moment that struck a nerve. And no amount of damage control could change that. This moment wasn't just about Usha Vance. It wasn't just about a heated exchange on live television. It was about something bigger, how women are treated in public life. A successful woman is always expected to justify her choices. If she builds a career, she's asked if she regrets not prioritizing family. If she supports her husband, people assume she must be compromising her beliefs. But when a man does the same, no one questions him. No one asks if he regrets standing by his wife. That was the real issue Usha exposed. Not with anger, not with frustration, but with pure composure. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't lash out. She simply refused to play the game. And in doing so, she showed something far more powerful than any argument: control. The host wanted a headline. Instead, he got a lesson. This wasn't just about politics. It was about the expectations placed on women in leadership, in marriage, in society. Usha flipped the script not by attacking, but by making people think. She turned a loaded question into a moment of clarity. And that's why this resonated beyond just political circles. People saw something they had experienced themselves: the unfair double standard, the quiet expectation that women must explain their choices in ways men never have to. But confidence isn't about having the loudest voice in the room. It's about knowing when to speak and when to let the truth speak for itself. So, have you ever been in a moment where you had to defend your personal choices? Let's talk about it. Drop a comment below. And if you found this breakdown insightful, make sure to subscribe for more thought-provoking stories like this one.